silver bullet to end cadre deployment once and for all is by voting the ANC out and voting the DA into national government. That should we be in a position to be a national government, we will within the first 100 days table in Parliament the End Cadre Deployment Bill, which will end this practice once and for all political parties in South Africa.
Alliance is taking one of the ANC's most controversial policies, cadre deployment, to court. The DA wants the court to declare cadre deployment and its implementation in government unlawful and unconstitutional. The opposition party says it wants the courts to clarify the separation of party and state by ruling on this matter. Govan Whittles reports.
The Democratic Alliance wants to have the ANC's cadre deployment policy declared unconstitutional and unlawful. The DA has launched an application at the North Gauteng High Court. It submitted the ANC's 2018 cadre deployment minutes and testimony to the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture as evidence for why this policy is unlawful and unconstitutional. But what exactly is wrong with it? Let's talk now to the Democratic Alliance's leader, John Steenhuisen, about this and a few other matters which have happened in South Africa over the last few weeks. John, thank you so much for your time. Let's begin with cadre deployment. What exactly makes cadre deployment and this policy unconstitutional?
Well, if you look at section 1973 of the Constitution, it makes it unconstitutional to appoint people or not appoint people based on their political affiliation or support or otherwise for a political cause. We believe that the cadre deployment policy is a clear contravention of that. It contravenes Chapter 10 of the Constitution, which deals with the public service, and also the Public Service Act, which makes it illegal to be able to do these sorts of things, and yet they are still continuing. So we want the court to finally rule that this behavior is inconsistent with the Constitution.
This is not the only action you're taking. Besides from the court, you also launched the End Cadre Deployment Bill in Parliament, and you're calling for the President to support that bill. What does it entail? What kind of support are you looking for?
So essentially what the End Cadre Deployment Bill will do is insulate the public service from having people put into it based on know who rather than know how. It would look at qualifications, it would look at suitability for the job and make sure the right people are in the right positions for the right reasons. At the moment, we've got people being put into positions on the basis of the colour of their party card in their wallet. And that is why we're seeing wholesale collapse of state-owned entities and municipalities and government departments and other key organs of state who have been infiltrated by this policy. And so the people are suffering as a result of that. So this will essentially firewall it, no matter which party is going to be in power in South Africa after the 2024 election. It'll make sure that no political party ever can party deploys into the permanent civil service to be able to end up and enable any further state capture to take place.
A capable and professional state, that's what lawmakers want government to achieve in order to improve services. But ideas on the road to get there appears to differ at a political level, with the DA once again criticizing the ANC's cadre deployment policy as the root cause of poor governance. The party says it will go back to the Concord to ask the Apex Court to hold Mbalula in contempt of court.
I can confirm to this House that the DA is today filing fresh papers to hold ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula in contempt of court for failing to comply with the Constitutional Court's order that complete national cadre deployment records dating back to the 1st of January 2013, when President Ramaphosa became cadre chairman, must be handed over.
In another move, the DA says it has also filed a Promotion of Access to Information Act application to force the ANC to disclose all cadre deployment records.
The DA yesterday submitted a new request in terms of the Promotion of Access to Information Act to similarly expose complete records of the ANC's dozens of provincial and regional cadre deployment committees that have collapsed service delivery in all ANC-run provinces and municipalities. The ANC has 30 days to hand over these new records, and all I can say is tick-tock.
But the ANC has been quick to defend the cadre deployment policy and in turn also accused the DA of having its own cadre deployment.
The DA has also used deployment to reward their members with high remuneration, such as the former DA MP Tim Harris, who gets a whopping 2.5 million rand at West Grove, and the wife of Craig Kesson, who receives 3.3 million per year as an executive manager at the City of Cape Town. In Tshwane, the DA illegally appointed Stefan de Villiers, who was a bodybuilder, as a head of the executive of the Office of the Mayor, earning over 1 million rand a year, and Praveen Govender as Chief of Emergency with a fake qualification, to name a few. The ANC's cadre deployment cannot be questioned in principle, as it is the sine qua non of democracies across the world, and we must not allow the DA to reduce it to a mafia-like activity.
Other political parties say a professional public service can help improve service delivery.
Professionalization of the public service does not mean making public service white, as the DA refers to. As the racists, these people in the blue are referring to, their fight against the so-called cadre deployment is in essence the fight against black professionals in the public sector. To the racists, being black equals incompetence and corruption, and being white equals competence and clean governance. We want the public service run professionally, free of corruption.
Professionalizing our public service will enhance service delivery, reduce corruption, increase trust and confidence of the public, ensure innovation within the sector, and lead to effective governance and policy implementation. Public service delivery in South Africa is at critical levels of dysfunction.
You must appoint it by appointing the best person for the job, irrespective of race, who has the appropriate track record, experience, qualifications, and references, not the person who is politically connected and in many cases otherwise incompetent. You have to put the needs of South Africans first, not the needs of the ANC and its cadres.
Madam Speaker, and thank you very much, Mr. President, for the maturity of your response, and we associate ourselves with it. But the question that the honourable member has asked is frankly a deflection, because we all know that the hung municipalities are not the real problem in South Africa. If we look at the recent report released by your COGTA minister, there are 64 municipalities on that list that are listed as dysfunctional. Barely a few of them are hung or minority government councils, but those lists are jam-packed with ANC majority coalitions. And you're right about local investment. And when people vote with their feet and businesses vote with their feet, in places like Lichtenburg and Standerton, they're leaving because those ANC councils have failed to deliver basic services. And I would say to you, Mr. President, there's no bigger threat to service delivery at a local level in South Africa than an ANC government coupled with ANC cadre deployment. Now that the voters have now said the same thing around South Africa, Mr. President, but you must now concede that the policy of cadre deployment is directly responsible for the collapse of local government service delivery and must surely now be abandoned.
Well, good afternoon to you and to the viewers at home. Earlier this morning, the DA is committed to continue their fight in abolishing the long-standing policy of the ANC that is cadre deployment, despite the Gauteng High Court actually ruling that the policy may not be unconstitutional, as the DA contends. Now, there are a couple of developments that the DA has announced to keep this fight going. One of them is the filing of a contempt of court application, which could result in imprisonment or a fine or both, depending on the severity of the contempt that we're speaking on. I just want to bring in Dr. Leon Schreiber, the DA's MP that has been instrumental in this campaign or this matter regarding this contentious issue of contempt. Now, what we do know is that when the Constitutional Court ruled in your favor, you did get records. So there was a form of compliance. We now have learned that the records that you do want, you did not get those records. And it's on the basis of that, or more rather, should you elaborate, that you're filing for that contempt. Perhaps give us the background as to the different grounds upon which you are going to try and convince the court that the ANC has committed contempt by not giving you those full records.
Yes, we believe that what the ANC has done is in extreme bad faith for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you look at the records, 1,300 pages that they have handed over, more than half of it is redacted beyond any real practical use. And very clearly in the court order that was issued, there was no reference to such redactions. That was not permitted in terms of the court order. So already there, the ANC has not complied. Then if you go back and you look at the ANC's claim about a laptop that mysteriously crashed in 2021, we've actually looked at the dates that the ANC claims on which this happened, which was well after the court process started. This was also never put before the court, which means that the ANC actually failed to disclose pertinent information to a court, which again is a ground on which a contempt application can be pursued. Then, of course, there's the fact that the ANC did not comply with giving us the records dating all the way back to 2013. In fact, there's a 5-year period that's completely missing, not only for meeting minutes, but also for WhatsApp conversations, emails, and the like. What's problematic for the ANC is in the records they did hand over, the very first item on the very first minute refers to the adoption of previous minutes. So according to that piece of documentation from the ANC itself, the practice of keeping record clearly predates the 2018 period. So putting all of that together, it's quite clear to us that the ANC has not complied with the court order in full. They've acted in bad faith on a number of occasions, and most critically, this suggests a very deliberate cover-up, because the period affected is only the period 2013 to 2018 when President Ramaphosa was the chairman of this committee, and that's also the most important period because that's when state capture was at its height. And as we've said all along, we need this information to understand the role of the deployment committee in appointing the people who captured the state.
Are you accusing the ANC of deliberately withholding information to protect its president?
That's exactly what we're saying, and the court filing on this matter has already, we're already busy drawing it up now that the ANC has missed the deadline. It's not like the ANC didn't have ample opportunity. This is an important point as well. This has been a 3-year court process during which they lost in 3 different courts, where they had lots of time to actually establish what records they have. And interestingly, in their very first correspondence with the DA on this matter, going back even before the first court application, there was an indication from the ANC that the information that we requested, dating back to 2013, well, they might make it available if we meet certain conditions. That was their initial line.
What would be the conditions?
Well, I mean, that was clearly, they were saying we have to illustrate what rights were affected by these records. Clearly, that's why we then had to go to court to demonstrate to them the rights affected. But the point is they've changed their story and have now moved towards this claim that these things don't exist. We also gave them time. They had 5 working days after the Constitutional Court's order, and we again sent them a letter of demand saying, hand these things over so that we don't need to file a contempt of court application, but they didn't even respond.
The DA is profoundly dishonest and misleading the public in presenting itself as a party that does not deploy its members into the public service to pursue its policy agenda. In this regard, the DA pretends that all its deployees are merely recruited by the chance of merit and not a deliberate effort to advance the DA's agenda. There is evidence in the city of Tshwane and the Western Cape that the DA itself has been practicing its own version of deployment of its leaders and members into positions of administration where the party governs. This includes a parallel process of the DA federal executive candidates for employment in DA-led municipalities, as described by Alan Winde in a submission to the public protector in 2021, in which he correctly argued that such internal rules and policies are widespread, quote unquote, widespread and common. The narrative that the deployment of cadres is unconstitutional and unlawful has no basis in law. Hence, the High Court correctly found out that the DA failed to point out to any text, neither in the Constitution nor any statutes that supports their claims. So the question whether any party in its own internal processes discussed the names of particular candidates is not material if the final decision is in accordance with what the constitutional or legislative prescripts demands. This is what the court has actually said yesterday. So the DA has no case on this matter, as the court has ruled. Secondly, another ideological and philosophical incomprehensions being churned out by the DA propaganda machine is that the ANC cadre policy and deployment strategy is responsible for state capture and corruption. There is no truth to this false narrative. Those of us who live in South Africa know fully well how state capture was carefully orchestrated and executed by the Gupta brothers and their network of enablers in government and big corporates. There is ample evidence from the Zondo Commission and several court cases. In its lapse of logic, informed by the attempt to hoodwink voters, the DA has suddenly and opportunistically forgotten that state capture and corruption is not a party political agenda, but a result of calculated actions by networks of individuals who seek to weaken and destroy the capacity of state institutions so that they can loot large sums of public funds for their own selfish benefit. The DA wants to excuse the thieves and give them political cover that they were stealing for an ANC instead of ensuring that those responsible for state capture and corruption in our land must face the consequence of their selfish and greedy deeds. Since the early days of our democracy, the DA has been pushing the narrative that cadre policy and deployment policy strategy is the cause of government failure, because this is ostensibly about destroying people who have no qualifications and competencies for the positions for which they are deployed. You can look at all the people who have deployed, who have given you what we have given to the DA. Go and check their qualifications. As cadres of the movement, check them. I challenge you. And come back to me and say, this one did not qualify, did not go to school. DA deploys standard 3s where they govern. They deploy bodybuilders where they govern. That is the strategy of brother bond. We are not brother bond. We are not brother bond. They call us brother bond. We are the party of transformation. That's what we are. We don't deploy bodybuilders. And that is why even in our municipalities, where there's been ineptitude in terms of the deployment of people, as the ANC, we have called a stop to that. We have called a stop to that. And then we have also looked at misdeployment, where you were supposed to have a doctor deployed to deploy a teacher. In the 30 years, we have changed that. But look at our deployment and our decisions and look at the minutes of that deployment. You will see that the people we deployed are qualified as the ANC. I won't mention them by names, even some of their people, because it has been redacted in terms of what we have given to them, because I don't want to be subjected to Popia tomorrow. And then people say that Mbalula broke the rule, and then that is it. I won't do that. Even those that you know, I won't mention them, who have been deployed by our movement to specific positions on account of their expertise and patriotic loyalty to our country, its constitution, and its transformation agenda. These include members and leaders of opposition parties. We have deployed, including people as consulate and everything, who are not members and who don't carry membership of the ANC, because it's a call of patriotism. And some of the loud mouths of the DA today were deployed and to senior positions out of the country by this government. In our government, despite our majority, we have even brought people in because we believe in this vision of a united South Africa. Unity of our people is sacrosanct. Unity in diversity is what we embrace. We are not a black African party, as much as that is defined in the content of our revolution, but we are a non-racial organization, and we have expressed that in terms of what we stand for. At the Zondo Commission, our President, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, made the point clear that there is nothing wrong with the policy itself, but there are known weaknesses in its application in instances where merit is not observed. I quote, "It is the ANC's view that the practice of cadre deployment should not be inconsistent with the principles of fairness, transparency, and merit in the appointment of individuals in public entities. Cadre deployment cannot be faulted in principle. It is a common feature of democratic practice around the country. But we will concede that there are weaknesses in its practical implementation that make the case for greater clarity both within political parties and the state," close quote. The 54th National Conference of the ANC has called on the organization to ensure that no unsuitable individuals, I repeat, no unsuitable individuals are deployed in the name of cadre policy, and that more investment should be made in the development and encouragement of ANC members to undergo rigorous ideological, academic, technical, and ethical training as part of the renewal project. The DA then concludes by putting forward the false narrative that all the social and economic problems of South Africa can be traced to ANC's cadre policy and deployment strategy. Deep structural inequalities, continuing racism, spatial and economic apartheid, and the fact that the face of unemployment, poverty, and inequality is black and female is apparently because of cadre policy, cadre deployment. This is not only ridiculous, but it is also incredible that the DA believes that South Africans are stupid or simply forgetful. An honest conversation among South Africans cannot be based on such a false starting and conclusion, described by the Gauteng High Court as quote-unquote speculation and conjecture. The question arises is, why is the DA seizing on cadre policy and hoping that the courts and the electorate will buy into their plan to declare transformation unlawful, unconstitutional, and therefore illegitimate? Why does this party think that South Africans will not see through its profound naked hypocrisy and its real intentions? Why does the right wing think that people will not see through their agenda of funding many small parties in order to fragment the forces that seek genuine transformation of our country through the unity of the motive forces for change that stands to benefit from such change? In delivering this year's January the 8th statement, the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, made reference to the fact that the DA-led transformation forces are converging, hoping to stop, derail, and reverse the transformation agenda. And in pursuit of these objectives, they have accordingly adopted many strategies and tactics. And some of them is the proliferation of political parties. The ideological offensive on cadre policy and its caricature and the distortion is aimed at mobilizing South Africans, including many black and women professionals who have been the beneficiaries of the transformation policies against the ANC. What the DA and other parties that practice deployment have failed to tell the people of South Africa is that they too practice deployment. The difference is that they deploy mainly white males as their fight-back strategy against national transformation in order to preserve the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. Unlike the DA, the ANC is open and transparent. Everything we seek to achieve and in whose interest are we pursuing is in our public documents and in the public domain. The National Democratic Revolution and the transformation agenda we are pursuing are no secrets. We have nothing to hide. Can the DA share with South Africans its minutes and records of deployment, decisions, whatever they call it, and explain what policies underpin such deployment? In other words, in pursuit of what kind of society and on whose behalf is the DA governing in the Western Cape and several municipalities? The ANC awaits the release of the DA records of deployment with bated breath.
The silver bullet to end cadre deployment once and for all is by voting the ANC out and voting the DA into national government. That should we be in a position to be a national government, we will within the first 100 days table in Parliament the end cadre deployment bill. We will within the first 100 days table in Parliament the end cadre deployment bill. We will within the first 100 days table in Parliament the end cadre deployment bill, which will end this practice once and for all political parties in South Africa.
The ANC Study Group on Agriculture has raised concerns over Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen's appointments. Roman Cabanac, a controversial podcaster, has been appointed as the Chief of Staff in Steenhuisen's office. His appointment follows shortly after another controversial appointment, YouTuber and podcaster Renaldo Gouws, as a Member of Parliament. Governance expert from the University of Johannesburg, Professor Daniel Meyer, joins me now to chat through this. Professor Meyer, I appreciate your time this afternoon. Your immediate reaction to how everybody seems to be reacting about John Steenhuisen's appointments.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's been very disappointing to read and to hear about these appointments. It seems like he's looking at appointing senior government officials that hasn't got the experience or the qualifications to fit those positions. So that's exactly what the DA was talking about when they took the ANC to court in 2022, asking for the cadre deployment records. And it seems like Minister Steenhuisen is now doing similar actions.
So a couple of these individuals, we have a YouTuber, in fact, we've got two YouTubers and podcasters. Not that those aren't great professions, but does that almost speak to John Steenhuisen not dealing with the gravity of office that should be dealt with?
Yeah, if you look at all of the research, even the future of government, that was the document done by the World Economic Forum 2013, I think it was then. It indicates that we need to appoint the best of the best in government. And I think that's where we've seen over the last 30 years, we haven't appointed the best of the best. We need a lean and mean government that's only appointing the best people, that's got experience, that's got the qualifications, but also committed to the cause. And the cause is to lift the quality of life of everybody, to be public servant, to serve the people. And if you appoint loyal party members or political intervention in appointments, my opinion is that you cannot appoint the best of the best, and you'll have an impact on service delivery. We've seen it. The Zondo Commission has also investigated cadre deployment, and it has led to government failures, corruption, and many other negative impacts on service delivery. And I think with this new government, with the new ministers, there's a new dawn, and we've turned the page. And all of these new ministers and even the current ministers must adhere to good governance. And good governance means transparency, accountability, efficiency, and in their appointments, let's appoint the best of the best. There's so many well-qualified people in this country that is not in work at this point of time. So the options for them to appoint the best is really quite open.
Professor Meyer, you raise an important issue, and that's the issue around the number of unemployed or qualified individuals in South Africa who have capacity to take up these jobs, have the right experience. Now, how does John Steenhuisen shake the finger pointing around jobs for pals that's been pointed, and particularly when we have it on record that he's written to the Public Service and Administration Minister Mzama Buthelezi to deviate from the minimum requirements stated in the Public Service Act to staff his office?
I think it's absolutely inexcusable to act that way. We need to criticize when we must criticize. Doesn't matter which political party, if it's ANC, DA, EFF. If people are not working according to the Public Services Act, the Constitution, and other legislation, we know that the Constitution, in terms of Section 195, also talks about merit appointments, competence, and non-political interference when we appoint people in the public service. So if we follow all of those regulations in the Constitution, as well as in the Public Services Act, Section 11 talks about the professionalization of the public service. And we all are hoping that over time we can have a more professional public service, which will lead to improved service delivery. And that's what we all want. And that will lead to economic development, economic growth, as well as improvement of quality of life of everybody, with basic services available to everybody. But if we keep on appointing friends, family, political people in the political sphere that is part of parties, I cannot see that we're going to turn that ship. So we need to follow good governance principles in this country, and then the ship can be turned around.
Now, John Steenhuisen is often criticised for only having a matric qualification, right? Now, in your view, how significant is this in the context of his role as a political leader, and what impact might it have on his decision-making and governance?
Yeah, it doesn't matter, or it matters what is your qualifications, but it seems like John Steenhuisen feels like if you've got experience, possibly you can do the job. It is possibly true, but for me, to be fair in terms of moving the public service to a higher level, we need to have the right qualifications firstly. So degree, if it's a senior manager, there's levels of NQF levels that senior managers must have. The qualifications, the right number of experience and the right kind of experience for the job. For example, the senior manager hasn't got the right experience or the qualifications. And then also commitment to the public service. Those three things I feel will make a public servant a very good appointee. Plus the commitment side of it is really, really important, that people in the public service must serve all of us, not only specific, let's say, parties or part of the community, but for everybody. And that is what we need to go forward. And that's why this new government is not only a single party, but a mixture of a number of political parties. And that gives us hope. And that's why the markets has been responding so positively towards this new government. They are more open to the private sector, participation in the private sector. So overall, it's very positive outlook. But let's hope the new ministers and John Steenhuisen will reconsider this and appoint the best of the best for everybody in the country.
So where's public trust in this conversation? Now, given Steenhuisen's background and his approach to cadre deployment, right? And he's spoken out and vilified it, saying that the ANC has abused office. They've invited and hired their friends and their mates and so on. You know, multiple conversations in this light, right? And he seems to be doing exactly the same.
100% correct. I agree with that. If all the reports are true, definitely he should reconsider this. It's not within the principles of good governance. As I've said, transparency, openness, accountability, effectiveness, and it will lead to more finger pointing, more corruption, more weakening of institutions, even his own department. SOEs has been struggling with this. The ANC in the past appointed cadres within ESCOM and other law enforcement agencies, and that's why we sit where we sit. That's why we had the Zondo Commission. A huge part of the Zondo Commission investigated the cadre deployment and found that it also were part of this process of failure of certain departments within the government, and it led to corruption. So I'm hoping that he's going to reconsider this. The DA should also intervene here, because they were the party that took the ANC to court in terms of the cadre deployment processes. And they must have their own, clean their own house before they can accuse anybody else. But it's for everybody, all State Department, government officials. We need to appoint based on merit, competency, and no political interference.
Well, finally, Professor Meyer, it obviously doesn't follow that these individuals that have been appointed, if they have been appointed indeed by John Steenhuisen, are incompetent individuals. In fact, I think that he's written to the Public Service and Administration Minister asking for him to deviate from the minimum requirements. Is this a standard process? Can you write to the Public Service and Administration Minister and ask to deviate because you want to employ individuals, not necessarily because it's a job for pals or because they're not qualified, but because you strongly feel that they're the most suited to what it is that you're trying to achieve in your office?
I don't feel that is standard procedure. As I've said, there's so many people available with good experience, with the right qualifications, even people exiting from universities that is ready to work, that's well-trained people in public management and administration. So I think there's a lot of options for him. Why singling out these 3 or 4 people that should be the best of the best? They are clearly not the best of the best if we test it against qualifications, experience, and commitment to the general service delivery of government. So for me, if all of these reports are true, it doesn't make sense. So I would like him to reconsider this and have an open and transparent process to appoint people within his department and his support team for the future and for the best of all of us.
Governance expert at University of Johannesburg, Professor Daniel Meyer. Appreciate your time this afternoon. Walk us through that conversation as DA leader John Steenhuisen has allegedly written to the Public Service and Administration Minister Mzama Buthelezi to deviate from the minimum requirements as he seeks to employ individuals who are not qualified for their respective positions.